Think about how big time really is, stretching out endlessly before you were born and continuing long after you're gone. Your life is just a tiny moment in the huge timeline of the universe. The universe has been around for billions of years, and it will go on for billions more. Your time here is just a small spark of awareness in a universe that doesn't pay attention. The idea that we'll be forgotten isn't meant to scare us, it's meant to set us free. It reminds us to focus on what actually matters during the little time we have. Across history, countless people have lived, loved, and vanished without leaving any sign. Even the biggest empires and the most amazing things people have done will eventually be forgotten. Our modern need to be remembered or leave a legacy often hides a basic truth. Nothing lasts forever, not even our memories. Part 1. The erosion of memory. Time slowly wears away memories the same way waves wear down mountains into sand. This happens just as naturally as seasons changing or stars moving across the sky. Think about how only a small number of people today even know the most famous names from 500 years ago. What once seemed like world-changing actions are now just footnotes in history books that most people never read. Names like Alexander, Caesar, and Cleopatra are now just characters in old stories, their real lives and feelings mostly lost. We don't know their private thoughts, their worries, or their quiet moments. Billions of people have lived and died, and almost all of their names and stories are completely gone. Each of them had their own dreams, fears, loved ones, and way of seeing the world. Now all of it is gone. Even the ancient pharaohs who built giant monuments to be remembered forever are mostly forgotten as real people. We may know their titles or see their tombs, but we don't know who they really were or what they struggled with each day. Maybe your great-grandchildren will remember your name or keep your picture, but 10 generations from now, your DNA will be so spread out that it will barely exist in them. The memory of you will fade, like footprints on a beach being washed away by the tide, slowly getting smoother until no sign of them is left. This isn't something tragic, it's simply the way nature works. It's how the universe keeps its balance. Even digital records that we think might last forever will eventually break down or become impossible to read as technology changes. Or maybe people just won't care about them anymore and they'll get lost in the endless sea of human information. Part 2. The liberation of insignificance. There's a deep kind of freedom in realizing that in the universe, you are very small. Once you understand this, you no longer feel like you have to do something huge just to justify your life. When you know you'll eventually be forgotten, you can stop living for other people's praise or for history's approval. You no longer have to carry the heavy burden of leaving a legacy, a burden that has crushed many people throughout history. You're free to live in the present moment in a real and honest way and to focus on how meaningful your experiences feel right now instead of worrying about how history will view them. This shift in how you see life changes how you judge the value of your days on Earth. This way of thinking isn't hopeless or negative. It's a kind of freedom from the pressure to be remembered. It gives you permission to live just for the sake of living, not for the sake of being remembered. Once you accept that your name will one day disappear from human memory, it's like a weight is lifted off your shoulders. You don't have to carve your name into history to prove your life meant something. What matters most is how you feel, how deeply you live during the time you're here. The love you give and receive is valuable just because it exists, not because it'll be recorded forever. Think of how many people in history gave up their own happiness just to be remembered. They didn't live for themselves, they lived for future generations who would never really understand them. By accepting that you'll be forgotten, you can take control of your own time. You can finally ask yourself what truly makes you happy, not what looks impressive to others. This new way of thinking helps you see the meaning in small things. A kind word from a friend, a delicious meal, the warm sun on your face. These moments don't need to be part of some big plan to matter. They are complete just as they are, brief, beautiful, and perfect in their shortness. Just like you. A sunset isn't less beautiful because it fades away. Maybe that's what makes it so special. Part 3. The democracy of oblivion. Being forgotten is something that happens to everyone. It's the final way in which we are all equal. Kings and beggars, geniuses and everyday people, all of them will be forgotten. And in a strange way, that's comforting. It shows us that every person who ever lived is on the same path toward being erased from memory. It connects us as humans, no matter how different we seem. The pharaoh who built the Great Pyramid and the slave who helped build it are both forgotten today. Their bodies have turned to dust, and their voices are forever silent. The most powerful rulers and the most humble workers from 2,000 years ago now exist in the same way. as faded memories or not remembered at all. The differences between them, which seemed so important at the time, have been completely erased by time. Even the rare few whose names still survive, like Socrates, Buddha, or Confucius, are now mostly seen as ideas and symbols, not as the full complex people they once were. The real humans behind those names are long gone, replaced by what modern culture needs them to be. We know almost nothing about their daily lives, their small habits, or even what their laughter sounded like. Who they really were is lost forever, and the same will happen to us. Understanding this shared fate can help us stop seeing ourselves as separate from others. Things like status, wealth, and fame, which seem so important today, will eventually mean nothing. Once you truly understand that both you and your enemies will one day be forgotten, many arguments and problems start to feel less serious. What really matters is the kind of awareness you bring to your life while you're alive. Part 4, the illusion of permanence. We build huge monuments, write books, and make art because deep down, we're pushing back against the idea that we won't last forever. These efforts to be remembered show how uncomfortable we are with our own short time here. Think about the ancient library of Alexandria, which once held the greatest collection of knowledge in the world. It burned down, and countless important works were destroyed, along with the names of their creators. In today's world, we think digital records are safer, but they can still be lost to old technology or just forgotten. Think about how many early websites have already disappeared, wiping out the digital history of their creators. Even the things we think will last forever are just temporary when you compare them to the endlessness of time. Even the pyramids will one day turn to dust, just like all human creations will. Believing that anything we make is permanent often leads us to spend too much energy on things that future people might not even care about. We end up trading our present happiness for a legacy that will fade away like morning mist. But when you accept that nothing lasts forever, you're free to create just for the joy of it. You can build sandcastles knowing the ocean will wash them away and still find that beautiful. Part 5, the weight of significance. The belief that we have to matter to the universe puts a heavy emotional weight on us. It makes us feel like we must prove our worth through big accomplishments, fame, or long-lasting impact. This pressure makes many people feel like they're never doing enough to deserve to be remembered. It turns life into something we're constantly trying to prove, instead of something we simply live. Think about the things people regret on their deathbeds. Most regrets aren't about failing to achieve greatness. They're about missing small, beautiful moments with others. Hardly anyone wishes they'd spent more time building monuments to themselves as they approach the end. The dying rarely say they should have worked harder to leave a legacy or gotten more attention from strangers. Instead, they wish they had been more open, spent more time with the people they love, and expressed how they truly felt. The strange thing about wanting to be significant is that we often lose the very moments that give life meaning while chasing that significance. We give up being fully present just to be remembered. We choose being praised in the future over connecting with people now. But when you let go of needing to matter in the long run, you start mattering more in the present. This is the real freedom that comes from knowing you'll eventually be forgotten. Part 6, the witness fallacy. We often think that something only matters if someone else sees it or remembers it. This is a mistake, a mental trap that makes us want to document every special moment instead of actually living it. We start performing not for ourselves, but for some imaginary audience in the future. How many times have people seen a beautiful place through their phone screen, more focused on taking a photo than actually being there? We give up the real experience just to create a memory that hardly anyone will look at, and eventually no one will remember. But a moment doesn't lose value just because no one documents it. A joyful or meaningful moment is still real and complete, even if no one else sees it or remembers it. The sunset is still beautiful whether it's photographed or not, and your experience of it is enough. It doesn't need to be remembered to have mattered. When you stop needing someone to witness your life, you can truly live each moment. You realize that your own awareness is enough to give your experiences meaning. This change turns everyday moments into something sacred, perfect and whole without needing anyone else's approval. A bird's song doesn't need an audience to be beautiful, and neither does your life. Part 7, the memory paradox. It's ironic that the people who are remembered most in history often didn't care about being remembered at all. They were fully engaged in what they loved doing. They didn't think about legacy. They lived their lives, present in every moment. Think of someone like Vincent van Gogh. He died thinking he was a failure. His paintings weren't appreciated during his lifetime. He didn't create art to be remembered. He painted because he had to express what he felt inside. And in our personal lives, it's often the people who try hardest to be remembered who are forgotten first. Real, lasting impressions come from being present and truly connecting with others, not from trying to be important. Think about a teacher who changed your life. They probably did it just by being there, truly caring. Not because they were trying to make history. They gave something of themselves without expecting anything in return. Real impact often happens as a side effect of doing what matters to you, not because you're aiming for recognition. When you stop needing to be remembered, you're free to focus on what you genuinely care about. And strangely, that's often what makes people remember you, not because you tried, but because you were real. And even if cosmic forgetfulness is still your fate, by then, it won't matter whether you're remembered or not. Part 8, the continuous present. Our minds like to break time into past, present, and future, but that's just a helpful idea, not the truth. In reality, we only ever exist in the present. Memory and anticipation are just thoughts. Our obsession with being remembered is really a way of trying to stretch our lives beyond this one moment. It's our way of denying that we only ever exist in the now, but once you fully accept that you exist only in this moment, the fear of being forgotten loses its power. If life only happens now, why should it matter if this now is remembered later? What really matters is the quality of your awareness in this exact moment. That's how the value of your life should be measured. This changes everything about how you spend your energy and attention. Think of how much anxiety about being remembered pulls us out of the present, even though the present is the only time we actually live. We give up our only real experience right now for an imaginary future we'll never see. But when you accept that you'll be forgotten, you can finally show up fully in your own life. You stop acting like a character in a story that needs to be told later. You become a person, alive in the now. Part 9, the burden of history. Think about how many people throughout history have felt crushed by the pressure to live up to someone else's memory. Children of famous people, successors of great leaders, they carry a weight that isn't theirs. Being remembered can create expectations for those who come after you, locking them into roles they didn't choose, and making it harder for them to live freely. In that way, being forgotten can be a gift we give future generations. It frees them from trying to live up to our reputation. Even on a personal level, being remembered too well by loved ones can become a burden. Grief can trap the living in the past, stopping them from moving forward into new experiences. Some cultures limit the time they mourn because they understand that life must continue. To truly heal after a loss, we have to forget a little, to gently let go of what used to be. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you also let go of the idea that others must hold on to you forever. That might be your final act of love, letting the people you leave behind move on. You allow them to remember you a little less as time goes on, to let your memory fade naturally. This isn't abandonment, it's a last gift, the gift of freedom. Part 10, the cosmic perspective. From the viewpoint of cosmic time, all of human history is barely even a blink. Everything humans have done, the monuments, the inventions, the famous names, will one day be erased. The sun will grow and eventually swallow the earth, wiping out every physical trace of human civilization. Even the most famous buildings and people will vanish completely, as if they were never here. This isn't a depressing idea. It's just the truth when you look at things on a cosmic scale. The universe, with its endless galaxies and stars, will keep going whether we record our lives or not. Our species is incredibly young in the life of the universe, and likely won't be around long compared to it. When you think about these massive time spans, even being remembered for 100 or 1,000 years starts to feel like almost nothing. But this cosmic viewpoint doesn't make your life less valuable. It just puts it into perspective. The universe doesn't need to remember you for your life to be meaningful. Just like a flower that blooms for only a short time is still beautiful. Your life still matters, even if it's temporary. Maybe real wisdom is in accepting that, in the grand scale of the universe, we're small, but still finding deep meaning in our own personal experience. Part 11. The self-illusion. The part of you that's afraid of being forgotten is actually not as permanent as it thinks. Who you are right now is not the same person you were 10 years ago, and not the same person you'll be 10 years from now. Your body has changed. Your memories have shifted. Your beliefs and values have evolved. In many ways, your past selves have already been partially forgotten, even by you. You remember only some moments clearly, and even those are shaped by how your mind wants to tell the story. We keep a sense of being the same person by creating a story about ourselves. But these stories leave out so much. Most of your experiences are already gone, lost to the limits of memory. The self that's afraid of disappearing is already disappearing all the time, little by little, moment by moment. Once you see how temporary and changeable the idea of you really is, the fear of being forgotten starts to lose its grip. If there is no fixed, unchanging self, then what exactly are we so desperate to preserve in memory? This realization lets you hold your identity more loosely. You don't have to stick so tightly to one version of who you are. You can grow, you can shift, you can reinvent yourself freely. You are no longer trapped by who you used to be. Part 12. The attention economy. Today's world treats attention like money, something to buy, sell, and fight over. Social media plays on our fear of being forgotten. It promises digital immortality, making us think that likes, views, and followers somehow give us lasting worth. But in chasing this kind of attention, we waste so much of our real energy. We try to go viral, build personal brands, and stay visible, while often forgetting to actually live. We give up meaningful, private moments for public ones that feel hollow. It's like we believe it's better to be seen for a second than to live deeply without an audience. But if you can accept that you'll be forgotten, you can step away from this exhausting race. You can reclaim your moments, not to post or promote, but to fully experience. In a world that measures people by numbers and reach, choosing depth over popularity is a radical act. You free yourself from needing to be seen, and that freedom lets you focus on what matters, not how many people are watching. Part 13. The freedom of anonymity. Throughout history, some of the most beautiful, powerful things have been created by people whose names we'll never know. Think about the architects who designed ancient cathedrals or the storytellers behind old folktales. They didn't work for fame or recognition. They built and wrote because it meant something to them or to serve something bigger than themselves. Because they didn't attach their names to their work, they weren't chasing ego. Their creations could speak for themselves. There's something deeply freeing about creating or giving without needing credit. An anonymous gift, for example, is often the most pure form of generosity, given with no expectation of anything in return. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you can start living this way. Your actions gain value because they matter to you, not because they'll be remembered. You're no longer doing good things so people will admire you. You're doing them because they feel right, because they align with who you are. Instead of asking, will this make people remember me? You ask, does this reflect what I care about most? This shift leads to a more honest, meaningful life. And ironically, those who live this way often leave a deeper impression, simply by being true. Part 14. The myth of originality. The fear of being forgotten often pushes us to try and be totally original, to create something so unique that it will make us stand out forever. But true originality is mostly an illusion. Everything we make is built on what others have already done. Every inventor, artist, or thinker builds on ideas from the past, even if they don't realize it. Most of what we create isn't a solo act. It's part of a massive, ongoing human story. In fact, the greatest stories, inventions, and ideas have shown up independently in different cultures, again and again. They come not from individual brilliance alone, but from our shared human experience. Even when you feel like you're being completely original, you're likely remixing ideas, drawing from collective memory, passing down timeless truths. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you can let go of the need to be the first, the best, or the most unique. You create because it feels meaningful, not because you're trying to claim credit. You become part of something bigger, a flow of creativity and wisdom passed from one person to the next. You no longer need to plant your flag, you just need to contribute your piece to the great ongoing conversation of humanity. Part 15. The quality of attention. What really shapes your life isn't how long you'll be remembered. It's how fully you pay attention while you're alive. A scattered, distracted life, chasing more and more, will feel empty, no matter how many people remember you. But a life where you are fully present, deeply aware, and paying attention, that kind of life is rich, even if no one else knows about it. Maybe true wealth isn't found in legacy, but in your ability to be truly alive in each moment. Think about how often worrying about legacy takes you out of the now. You're so focused on making an impact across time that you miss what's right in front of you. The present slips by unlived, while the future you're chasing never really shows up. Every moment you spend trying to be remembered is a moment you're not living. But once you accept that you'll be forgotten, you can bring your attention back to where it belongs. You can fully engage with your life, not to record it or promote it, but to live it. This kind of presence creates a life that doesn't need applause or memory. It doesn't need to be remembered later to be deeply worth living now. Part 16. The inheritance of forgetting. Each generation forgets most of what the previous one knew, believed, and valued. This might sound sad, but it's actually necessary. It's how culture evolves and makes space for new ideas. If we remembered everything from our ancestors, if we believed all that they did and followed all of their ways, we'd be stuck, buried under the weight of history. We wouldn't have room to grow, to change, to imagine new ways of living. Forgetting is a form of clearing space. It's not just natural, it's vital. It allows every generation to shape the world in a way that fits their own moment. Just like your own memory has to forget some things to stay useful, collective memory must also forget in order to stay alive and meaningful. So being forgotten isn't a failure, it's a contribution. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you become part of this beautiful process of renewal. You stop trying to control the future and instead let it become what it needs to be. You step aside so others can create their own world. This kind of letting go is a gift to those who come after you. Maybe the greatest gift. You give them the freedom to shape their lives without being trapped by yours. Part 17. The intimacy of impermanence. There's something profoundly intimate about moments we know won't last. That's why sunsets, final goodbyes, and last conversations before a departure hit us so deeply. When we're aware that a moment is fleeting, we tend to feel it more. Its temporary nature sharpens our attention, softens our hearts, and brings a quiet tenderness. This is the emotional intensity we feel in partings and endings. It's not despite their impermanence, but because of it. The Japanese have a beautiful phrase for this, mono no aware, a gentle sadness at the passing of things. Cherry blossoms, for instance, are loved precisely because they bloom so briefly before they fall. Their fragility is their beauty. When you accept that you too will be forgotten, you start to carry this awareness into everything you do. You begin to see each moment as precious because it won't last, not with sorrow, but with a kind of deeper appreciation. Even the ordinary becomes extraordinary when you realize it will soon be gone. This is the strange miracle that you're here at all, briefly, vividly, forgettably. And yet it matters. Part 18. The currency of remembrance. In the world we live in, remembrance is treated like currency. We offer it as a reward and withhold it as punishment. You'll be remembered for this, we say. Sometimes as a promise, other times a threat. We speak of paying tribute as if memory were some kind of moral tax. But the systems that decide who gets remembered are deeply flawed. History tends to remember conquerors more than caregivers. Drama over kindness, volume over quiet strength. The acts that shape real lives, nurturing, listening, showing up, often go unrecorded. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you step out of that economy. You stop chasing applause and start valuing what actually matters. Suddenly, the quiet gesture of kindness you share with someone, the comfort you offer in a private moment, becomes just as valuable as a headline-worthy achievement. You get to define what significance means on your own terms. Part 19, the fallacy of control. Wanting to be remembered often comes down to wanting control. Control over how our life will be seen after we're gone. But this too is an illusion. We don't get to decide how future generations will interpret our lives. In fact, those who are remembered are often remembered for reasons they never chose, and sometimes would have hated. Take Van Gogh or Kafka, men who died unknown, never imagining the fame they'd gain after death. They couldn't shape the narrative, and neither can we. Even those who write their own memoirs or build grand legacies can't control how they'll be seen. History rewrites everyone, so what's left for us to hold on to? Just this, the life we're living now. We can't shape how we'll be remembered, but we can shape how we treat the people around us. How we spend this one moment we're in, that's where our agency lives. Not in legacy, but in presence. Part 20, the ethics of presence. There's something ethical about letting go of the need to be remembered. It clears your vision. When you're no longer acting for applause, recognition, or your name in a book, you can finally do what feels truly right. Think about it. So many moral compromises are made in the name of legacy. We justify present harm by promising future good. We excuse injustice today by dreaming of how kindly history will view us tomorrow. But if you accept that you'll be forgotten, that future judgment loses its power. What matters instead is the direct effect of your actions, right here, right now, on real people, in real time. The question shifts from how will this be remembered to what does this choice say about who I am today? That shift changes everything. It frees you to be good, not for credit, not for reputation, but because it matters now. Part 21, the wisdom of uncertainty. Real wisdom often begins by admitting what we just don't know. And one of the biggest things we'll never truly control is how or if we'll be remembered. We imagine future generations finally understanding us. We hope they'll see what others missed. But these imagined futures are just projections, fantasies to soothe our fear of being forgotten. The truth is, no one knows what the future will make of us. No one knows who will be remembered or how. Even our own selves will change in ways we can't predict. The wisest thing we can do is admit this uncertainty and stop trying to control it. When you let go of the need to secure your legacy, you free up your energy for something better. Acting with clarity and presence, right now, you become more decisive, more open, more ready for life as it comes. And instead of clinging to a pre-written script, you're finally available for the wonder and surprise of the real thing. Part 22, the poetry of passing. There's a kind of quiet poetry in things that don't last. A beauty in the temporary that permanence can never touch. Think of a sand mandala, each grain placed carefully, lovingly, and then, when it's finished, swept away. Its destruction isn't tragic, it's part of the meaning. That's what makes it complete. In the same way, your life, temporary and dissolving, isn't less valuable because it ends. It's beautiful because it ends. Its impermanence is what makes it vivid. You don't need to leave something permanent behind for your life to matter. Like the sand mandala, it can be intricate, tender, full of care, even if no trace remains afterward. And maybe that's the point. Maybe your life is the artwork, and its passing is part of the masterpiece. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you're free to live with that kind of grace. To show up with care and presence, knowing that everything, yes, even this, will eventually pass. And in that passing, meaning is born. Because nothing would shine if not for the darkness it fades into. Nothing would matter if it didn't end. Part 23, the alchemy of acceptance. Accepting that one day you will be forgotten can change the heavy feeling of existential fear into a kind of peaceful presence in the now. This transformation, like turning lead into gold, doesn't happen through thinking alone. It grows slowly through something you feel in your body and your being. At first, this truth is hard to accept. We resist it. But if you sit with it, think about it, let it settle in you, it can unexpectedly set you free. What first feels like a loss turns out to be a gift. A space where you can live more honestly and fully. This transformation doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds slowly as the idea of being forgotten moves from your mind into your heart. It's a process that feels a lot like grief. You go through denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, and then, if you're lucky, acceptance. Many people never get to that final stage. They get stuck trying to make a deal with death, hoping to live on through their achievements or through their children. But for the ones who do make it through, something shifts. They gain a kind of presence that others who are still running from impermanence don't have. True acceptance isn't about giving up or losing hope. It's about shifting your focus, letting go of what doesn't matter and turning toward what does. You don't stop caring. You start caring about the things that actually mean something, like the quality of your awareness right now, in this moment. This change isn't something you can force. It comes naturally when you truly reflect on the fact that your time here is limited. And the deeper that understanding goes, the more fully you can live right here, right now. Part 24, the inheritance of anonymity. Most of what we enjoy in life comes from people whose names we'll never know. The people who invented the wheel, writing, numbers, cooking with fire, they gave us incredible things, and yet they remain anonymous. The most important parts of civilization didn't come from one person's genius, but from shared intelligence built across generations. Our biggest gifts as a species weren't signed. No one took credit, they just gave. This reminds us of something powerful. The more essential the contribution, the more likely it is to become shared and separated from the person who made it. Take language, for example. It's probably the most amazing thing humans have ever created. But there's no one person we can thank for it. Its beauty lies in the fact that it belongs to everyone, and no one needs credit. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you join this noble lineage of quiet contributors. Your kindness, your small insights, your creativity, they all become part of something bigger. And they don't need your name attached to have meaning. This kind of anonymous giving might be the deepest way to contribute. You're not doing it for thanks or legacy. You're part of the invisible ground everything else stands on. Part 25. The futility of fame. Fame promises to help us live on in memory, but it rarely delivers what we imagine. In fact, people who become famous often feel more alone, more misunderstood than when they were unknown. Fame turns a person into a screen. Everyone starts projecting their desires and judgments onto them. They stop being seen for who they really are. They're remembered, yes, but not truthfully. Their real self is buried under the roles others want them to play. Even while they're still alive, fame makes them into a symbol. Their complexity is flattened into a simple story others can easily digest. They don't exist as full people anymore. Is that really what we want when we're afraid of being forgotten? Maybe what we actually want isn't to be remembered, but to be known. To be seen in our realness by someone who gets us. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you let go of the chase for this empty version of immortality. Instead, you can aim for something deeper, to be truly known by a few rather than vaguely remembered by many. This shift from wanting wide attention to deep connection can lead to a more honest and joyful life. Being loved by one person who truly sees you is worth more than being admired by millions who don't. Part 26. The wisdom of trees. Look at trees. They drop their leaves every season without clinging, without regret. They don't hold on to what they've already grown. They let it go, making space for what's next. This simple, natural process of growing, letting go, and growing again holds deep lessons for us. Maybe we too can learn to release our grip on past versions of ourselves, past successes, and even the urge to be remembered. Even after they die, trees still give. Their fallen trunks feed the soil and help new life grow. They don't vanish, they change. Their parts become something else, something alive again. This cycle offers a new way of thinking about continuation. It's not about living on in memory. It's about becoming part of what follows. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you tune into this ancient rhythm. You realize your actions keep flowing into life, even if your name doesn't. This way of thinking brings a kind of comfort, an ecological sense of belonging. You see yourself as part of something much larger. You're no longer trying to stand apart. You're fully participating in the natural dance of giving, growing, and releasing. Part 27. The liberation of letting go. Our fear of being forgotten comes from something deeper, our attachment to a fixed idea of who we are. We hold on to the story of our identity, trying to keep it going even after we're gone. But this attachment brings suffering. It puts us at odds with the natural impermanence of everything. Maybe real freedom doesn't come from being remembered. Maybe it comes from letting go of the need to keep being the same someone. Think about how much effort goes into maintaining our image, how we want others to see us. We constantly edit ourselves, make sure we stay consistent with who we've been. But this costs us something. It keeps us from responding to the moment with honesty. This pressure to keep a stable identity even extends to worrying about how we'll be remembered. But when you accept that you'll be forgotten, you begin to let go. You give up not only the need for legacy, but the need to lock yourself into one version of you. This freedom lets you live with more openness, more honesty, and more presence. You're no longer stuck trying to be. You're free to keep becoming. Part 28. The horizon of being. Our lives have a horizon, a limit we can't see past or control. Death is one of these limits. But forgetting is another, just as powerful. Beyond this horizon, we still affect the world in ways we'll never know. Just like light that keeps traveling even after the star is gone, your words, actions, and choices keep moving forward, even if no one remembers you made them. Your name may be forgotten, but the impact of your life can still ripple through time. A kind word to a child might shape them forever. An idea you share might change how someone sees the world, even if they don't remember where it came from. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you're still aware of this deeper truth. Your influence continues. You're part of something bigger, and your reach extends far beyond your own awareness. You drop stones into water and trust the ripples even if you'll never see them. That trust opens up a more generous way of living, one that doesn't need recognition or control. You give freely, knowing your actions will move beyond your view and beyond your memory. Part 29, the paradox of legacy. Here's the strange thing. People who try the hardest to be remembered often end up leaving behind the least meaningful legacies. Their focus on how the future will see them takes away from the honesty their work might have had. Think about how many forgotten monuments and names are out there, built by people desperate to be remembered. At the same time, things made for everyday use or with no thought of legacy often outlive their creators. This is the paradox. Real legacy comes not from trying to be remembered, but from letting go. The artist who gets lost in the work instead of thinking about fame often makes something timeless. The parent who simply cares for their child in the moment, not to build a family name, leaves the deepest impact. Real influence comes not from grasping at remembrance, but from being fully engaged with what matters right now. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you resolve this paradox. You create, you teach, you build. Not for the sake of being honored later, but because the act itself is worth it. Ironically, this kind of selfless creation is the very thing that tends to last. Letting go of the need for recognition often unlocks a kind of depth and realness that ends up standing the test of time. Part 30, the economy of attention. Our attention is one of the most valuable things we have, more important than time or money. It's limited, and how we choose to use it shapes the quality and feel of our entire life. But a lot of our attention gets eaten up by worrying about how we look to others, right now and in the future. We spend so much mental energy thinking about our image, our reputation, or our legacy that we miss out on the experiences themselves. Think about how often you catch yourself wondering how something will look to others instead of just living it. This kind of split attention keeps us from being fully present. We end up half-living everything. Even things that should feel immersive, like a walk in nature or time with someone we love, get interrupted by the part of our mind that's already framing the moment for future memory. It's like we're constantly trying to leave behind proof that we lived instead of simply living. But when you accept that you will be forgotten, something powerful happens. You stop wasting attention on trying to be remembered, and you start pouring that attention back into the moment itself. This shift is like getting a massive boost in life quality. Everything becomes richer, deeper, more alive, because your whole self is actually there. You realize that when you give your full attention to the present, it grows in value. It becomes something no distracted mind can ever touch. Part 31. The intimacy of mortality. The fact that we will all die and all be forgotten creates a deep connection between every human being. No matter how different we are in status, success, or recognition, this truth levels everything. There's a quiet closeness in this shared vulnerability. What unites us isn't what makes us special. It's what makes us temporary. Notice how, in moments of grief or crisis, differences between people often fade. In those times, what really matters comes forward. We connect on a basic human level, stripped of pride or image. Knowing that we're all subject to the same cycle of birth and death can soften us. It helps us see each other not as rivals fighting to be remembered, but as fellow travelers on a short, uncertain journey. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you tap into this sense of closeness. You stop needing people to be your audience, and you begin seeing them as companions. This creates a chance for more real, unguarded relationships. You become capable of loving and connecting without trying to impress or be remembered. You're simply present with others who are just as impermanent as you. Part 32. The gift of obscurity. There's a kind of freedom available to those who create or act without anyone watching. There's honesty in doing something for its own sake, without an audience and without applause. Think about the poet who never publishes, the musician playing alone in a basement, or the dancer moving quietly in a room. What they do is pure. They aren't trying to be seen, they're just expressing something real. This kind of private expression isn't limited to art. It can show up anywhere. A moment of quiet joy, a kind act no one sees, a deep thought in solitude, these things have a special magic. They don't ask to be remembered, they just are. Maybe your truest self shows up, not when you're trying to be known, but when you've let go of that need completely. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you can access this hidden freedom. You're free to explore, to create, to act, not to impress others, but because it matters to you. Often this kind of freedom unlocks parts of us we didn't even know were there. Things that used to be held back by fear or pride or the desire for recognition finally come alive. And you discover that work made without the burden of being remembered can have a beauty and honesty that remembered work rarely matches. Part 33. The Ecology of Memory. Memory, both personal and collective, works like a living system. It has limits. To make room for something new, something old has to fade. Forgetting isn't a flaw. It's a necessary part of staying healthy and alive. If we remembered everything all the time, we'd be crushed under the weight of it. So forgetting makes space for new experiences, new understandings, and new growth. This pattern isn't just true for our minds. It's true for cultures too. In order for new art, new ideas, and new ways of life to take hold, the old ones have to move aside. A culture can't grow if it's holding on to everything that came before with equal force. When you accept that you will be forgotten, you see your place in this natural rhythm. You realize that your fading from memory allows space for someone or something new to emerge. This understanding lets you see forgetting not as an erasure of value, but as a contribution. You're helping the future, not by staying in its spotlight, but by stepping aside so new light can shine. Part 34. The Museum of Memory. Picture human culture as a giant museum with limited space in its galleries. For a new exhibit to be shown, an old one has to be taken down or moved to storage. No matter how big the museum is, it can't display everything at once. So decisions must be made. What stays, what goes. These choices shift over time, as each generation decides what matters most to remember. What one era calls essential, the next might find irrelevant. Nothing, no matter how beloved, is guaranteed a permanent place in the spotlight. Even the most celebrated works eventually make way for what comes next. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you stop clinging to the idea of permanent display in this cultural museum. You see that even a brief moment of visibility is enough. This frees you. You stop suffering over the dream of immortality through memory. You learn to be content with your short time in view, knowing that stepping down allows others to be seen too. Part 35. The Freedom of Finitude. The fact that our lives are limited, including by death and forgetting, is what gives them meaning. If life had no limits, no end, it would start to feel empty. The urgency, the beauty, the specialness, all of it would fade. Think about it. If you had forever, would you really care about now? If you knew everyone would always remember you, would you still be honest in your efforts? It's our short, forgettable nature that makes every choice count. Boundaries force us to focus. They make us choose, care, prioritize. They turn a stretch of time into a story. They turn simple existence into something full of character. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you embrace the freedom that comes from having limits. You stop seeing time and death as enemies. You start to recognize them as the very things that make your actions matter. This shift lets you see your life for what it really is, a rare chance to shape something meaningful, not in spite of its end, but because of it. You realize that the value of life doesn't disappear when you fade from memory. It rises from the fact that you ever existed at all. Part 36. The Whisper of Reality. Reality often speaks in whispers, quiet moments that can't be fully captured or shared. The most powerful truths usually can't be put into words or saved in memory the way we'd like. Think about the moments when you felt deeply connected, had a sudden insight, or were truly present. These moments don't hold still when we try to describe or preserve them. They seem to vanish the moment we try to hold on to them. And maybe that's the point. Maybe meaningful experience is supposed to be felt directly, not captured. Maybe the very effort to keep it, through words, images, or memory, diminishes what made it special. The value of these moments is in how immediate they are, in how they exist only once, only now. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you begin to live in line with this truth. You stop trying to turn life into something that can be saved or shared later. Instead, you start receiving it fully exactly as it happens. And when you shift your focus from preserving the moment to simply being in it, you uncover parts of experience that were hidden before. You discover that reality gives itself most completely to those who stop trying to hold it beyond its time. Part 37. The Mirage of Digital Immortality. Technology today offers us a new promise, that we can be remembered forever through digital storage. We upload photos, write posts, and record ourselves, hoping that our voices will last beyond us. But that promise is an illusion. Digital memory can be lost just like any other, through outdated formats, broken files, or the flood of endless new content. Even now, so many old websites, programs, and platforms are already inaccessible or forgotten. To keep digital content alive, it requires constant effort, updating, migrating, maintaining. And even then, our carefully saved thoughts and images will probably disappear under the weight of future information. What we thought was permanent often turns out to be just as temporary as anything else. When you accept that you will be forgotten, you can still use digital tools, but without being fooled by their promise of immortality. You share and connect for the moment itself, not for a legacy. You begin using technology as a way to be present with others now, not as a storage box for your identity. You realize that the true value of expression isn't in being archived forever, but in being received fully when it's shared. Part 38, the mirror of mortality. Knowing that we're going to die and be forgotten can act like a mirror, one that reflects back what really matters. It forces us to face what's important and what's just noise. Think about how your priorities shift when time feels short. Things that once felt urgent, grudges, status, petty concerns, suddenly feel meaningless. The same thing happens when you truly realize that you won't be remembered. It strips away your public image, your titles, your accomplishments, and what's left is your real self. This mirror shows us who we are when there's no one left to impress. It invites us to live as if no one will remember, which is often when our most honest self appears. When you accept being forgotten, you don't have to avoid this mirror. You can look into it often and ask yourself, would this still matter if no one ever knew I did it? That question becomes a powerful tool. It guides you toward what really matters. It helps clear away all the things you do for show and leaves behind what your heart actually values. Part 39, the currency of experience. In a life that doesn't last forever, the one thing we truly have is experience. Not money, not fame, not even memory, just the felt, lived moment of being alive. Experience is the one kind of wealth that can't be stored or passed down. It only exists while you're feeling it, and then it's gone. But we spend so much of this precious currency chasing things like status or security. We trade away the present for symbols that can't actually fulfill us. We do this in hopes that we'll be remembered, that our life will have some kind of lasting mark. But all the recognition in the world won't make up for a life spent half present. No amount of fame can replace the joy of fully living your moments while you have them. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you begin to invest your awareness more wisely. You stop pouring your energy into being remembered and start using it to truly live. And when you do that, the return is immediate. The quality of your life rises. You realize that experience, fully felt right now, is more valuable than anything that could come after. Part 40, the gift of insignificance. There's a strange freedom that comes when you realize how small you are in the grand scheme of things. Instead of being scary, this can actually lift a huge weight off your shoulders. It's exhausting to carry around the belief that your life must matter on a cosmic scale, that everything you do must echo through time, that pressure can make it hard to just be. But look at the world from the view of deep time, millions or billions of years. All human lives, famous or not, start to look equally brief. The line between remembered and forgotten fades away. And this can be terrifying, or it can be liberating. It depends on how deeply you understand it. If you let this truth sink in, you may feel a lightness you've never known before. You stop chasing significance. You start living your life from a place of ease, joy, and freedom. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you welcome this gift of insignificance. You stop needing to be important. You start appreciating the moments you're given, exactly as they are. And paradoxically, this makes your life feel more meaningful. It frees you to find happiness and purpose in the now, without the pressure of needing to be eternal. Part 41, the quantum of presence. Being fully present isn't something you can do halfway. Presence comes in full moments. Complete attention with nothing held back. You're either here or you're not. But full presence is rare. Most of the time, our awareness is split between what we're doing now and what we're remembering, or planning, or worrying about. One of the biggest things that pulls us away from the present is the desire to be remembered. We imagine how the moment will look later. We think about how others will see it in the future. This habit makes us live life like we're watching it from the outside, already looking back while it's still happening. It turns us into observers of our own lives instead of participants. When you accept that you will be forgotten, you cut through this distraction. You stop trying to shape the present for future memory, you start just being in it. This shift opens the door to a deeper kind of awareness, the kind you find in flow states or deep meditation. You stop splitting yourself in half. and you discover that being fully present is a kind of wealth, something most people never access while they're busy chasing remembrance. Part 42, the meditation of mortality. Contemplating the fact that you'll eventually be forgotten isn't just a thought, it's a form of meditation. And it has the power to change you. Like ancient memento mori practices that use the awareness of death to sharpen values and priorities, this meditation goes a step further. It invites you not just to consider your physical death, but the complete dissolution of your social identity, your remembered self. And when you sit with this, not just intellectually, but emotionally, it begins to reveal things you usually don't see. Fears, attachments, the ways in which your identity clings to memory and legacy. This practice becomes most transformative when you don't just think about it, but actually imagine it. Picture a world where your name is no longer spoken, where nothing you've done remains visible, where every trace of your presence has faded, and when resistance rises, as it naturally will, you simply observe it with compassion. You don't run from the fear, and you don't try to push it away. You just witness it. With time, this meditation starts to reshape you. What once felt terrifying becomes bearable, then even peaceful. Eventually, it begins to feel liberating. And even when you're not actively doing it, this meditation continues working in the background, quietly rearranging your values and your perception. You realize that what looked like a terrifying emptiness is actually space, open space, for something more honest, more alive, to emerge. Part 43, the Phoenix Principle. In nature, nothing truly ends, it transforms. New life comes only after the old has burned away. Forest fires, for example, can unlock seeds that require intense heat just to sprout. The ashes of what once was, trees, plants, fallen leaves, become the nutrients for something entirely new. The past doesn't vanish, it's reconfigured. This is the Phoenix Principle. It's not about being remembered, it's about being transformed. Your continuation doesn't depend on someone recalling your name. Instead, it may happen as your ideas, your energy, your work quietly dissolve into the raw material for what comes next. Just like compost enriches new soil, your impact may emerge through complete dissolution, not preservation. That's a very different way to think about legacy. When you accept that you will be forgotten, you allow yourself to become part of this natural cycle. You release the need to be remembered as you are now, and instead open to becoming something new, something you may never see. And oddly, this surrender brings a kind of comfort. You realize that your influence doesn't need recognition to be real. Like nutrients in the earth, your contribution can be deep, quiet, and powerful without anyone knowing where it came from. Part 44, the ethics of inheritance. What we leave behind isn't just a name. It's the effect our actions have on those who come after. This ethical form of inheritance exists whether or not you're remembered. It shapes the future in real, tangible ways. Think of how decisions made by people you've never heard of still impact your life through the systems you live in, the tools you use, the environment around you. Their influence continues not through memory, but through changed conditions. This perspective shifts your focus. It moves you from asking, "Will they remember me?" to asking, "How will my choices affect their lives?" That shift often leads to better choices. Decisions based not on legacy, but on impact. It becomes less about being admired later and more about doing good now. By accepting that you will be forgotten, you become free to act in ways that truly help the future, without needing recognition. You begin planting seeds for trees whose shade you'll never sit in. And as you do, you may notice something unexpected. Your contribution becomes deeper, more generous, and often more effective when it's no longer filtered through the desire for credit. You discover that giving without needing to be remembered may be the most honest and lasting form of legacy there is. Part 45, the liberation from judgment. So much of our behavior is shaped by the fear of being judged, not just now, but even after we're gone. We don't just want to be remembered, we want to be remembered well, approved of, respected by some imagined future audience. And that imagined audience starts to feel like a jury, always watching, always evaluating. This anticipation of judgment can paralyze us. It makes us cautious, self-edited. We try to predict future values to make our choices match standards we can't possibly know. It's a strange kind of time-warped anxiety, one where the present is ruled by imagined opinions from the future. But when you truly accept that you will be forgotten, that imaginary tribunal disappears. You realize there will be no future committee to weigh your life, and with that realization comes freedom. Suddenly, you're no longer living for invisible judges. You're making decisions based on what feels right now, not on how it might look later. Moral clarity becomes easier to find. You're no longer distracted by speculation. You act based on your deepest sense of right, not someone else's idea of approval. Part 46. The authenticity of anonymity. There's a rare kind of authenticity that comes when you create or act without the possibility of credit or blame. When no one knows it's you, something changes. You're free from expectations, free from reputation, and often your truest voice can emerge. Think about anonymous donations, unsigned graffiti, secret notes, or acts of kindness done in silence. There's often a raw, honest power to those expressions that you don't find when someone's name is attached. Because the moment your name is tied to something, your ego shows up too. You start wondering how it will reflect on you, how others will react. You begin filtering your message, polishing, censoring, adjusting. Sometimes that makes things better. But often it strips away the most vulnerable human parts. You end up saying what's acceptable instead of what's real. When you accept that you will be forgotten, you start to let go of that filter. Even in signed work, your expression becomes freer, as if your name doesn't matter anymore. And when that happens, something opens up. You find yourself capable of honesty, creativity, and vulnerability that were previously buried under concern for how you'd be seen. You realize that your most powerful expressions might come from the part of you that no longer needs to be recognized. Part 47. The poverty of posterity. There's something hollow about creating for the sake of being remembered. The imagined audience of posterity is a poor substitute for real, living human connection. When we aim our work at the future, to be remembered, to leave a mark, we often miss the people right in front of us. And strangely, our work ends up connecting with no one, neither now nor later. Think about how many monuments feel cold and impersonal. Now compare them to handmade tools, letters, or songs made for loved ones. The latter, created for real relationships, often speak more clearly across time. They carry warmth precisely because they were rooted in present connection. This poverty of posterity affects all forms of human expression. When we create just to be remembered, something vital gets lost. The work becomes dry, strategic, sometimes lifeless. But when we create from real desire, from necessity or love in the present, something changes. A teacher who teaches to truly help students rather than to become known as a great educator usually ends up doing both. Meanwhile, those obsessed with legacy often achieve neither. There's an inverse relationship between present impact and future memory. The more we try to be remembered, the less alive our work becomes. But when you accept that you'll be forgotten, you stop performing for the future. You start communicating with those who are actually here. And that shift brings authenticity. Your words carry immediacy. Your work breathes. Ironically, it's often this present moment aliveness that gives something lasting value. You discover that true impact doesn't come from chasing remembrance. It flows through the surrender of that very concern. Part 48, the joy of recognition. Letting go of the need to be remembered doesn't mean giving up on recognition altogether. It just shifts where you find it. Because when you stop trying to be remembered by many, you open yourself to a deeper kind of recognition, one that's available right now. Not the recognition of your accomplishments or your name, but the recognition of your soul, your essential nature, by someone who truly sees you. Think about the quiet joy of being understood by even one person, of feeling known, not for your role or your image, but for who you really are inside. That moment of connection holds a richness no amount of posthumous fame could replicate. And it doesn't require an audience. In fact, it's often more powerful in intimacy than in public. The knowing glance of a friend who understands you, it carries more meaning than applause from 1,000 strangers. Maybe what we're really chasing isn't to be remembered by the world, but to be deeply seen by a few. Maybe what we crave isn't eternal legacy, but confirmation that our inner life has been witnessed and understood. And when you accept that you'll be forgotten, you begin to seek this kind of recognition instead. You look for connection that's real, not performance for an imagined future. And through that shift, your relationships deepen. Your self-expression becomes more authentic. You discover that being truly known by a few while you're still alive is infinitely more satisfying than being vaguely remembered by many after you're gone. Part 49. The wisdom of humility. Real humility isn't about putting yourself down. It's about seeing yourself clearly in the vastness of things. It's the honest recognition of your actual scale in the grand cosmic story. Think about it. Our expectation to be remembered implies an exaggerated sense of our importance, especially when you consider the billions who have lived and died, most of them forgotten. That inflation of self creates suffering. It sets us up for disappointment when reality doesn't match our imagined significance. But humility doesn't erase your worth, it reveals it, not as something cosmic and grandiose, but as something precise and human, something specific. This clarity is liberating. It relieves you from the exhausting effort to sustain an inflated image of yourself. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you stop trying to stretch your influence into eternity. Instead, you return to the grounded work of simply being yourself, flawed, temporary, valuable. And that's where the wisdom begins. You start adjusting your self-perception, day by day, into something more accurate. Not grand but honest, not immortal but real. And in that realness, you transform. You begin to relate to failure and success, to praise and criticism with more ease. You discover that humility doesn't shrink your power, it strengthens it, by cutting out the noise of ego and letting your true capabilities come through. Part 50, the eternal present. Maybe eternity isn't a stretch of infinite time. Maybe it's something else entirely. Maybe eternity is the timelessness that exists right here, when you fully inhabit a moment. This eternal present becomes available not when we try to last forever, but when we stop trying altogether. When we stop worrying about continuation, something opens up. You've probably felt it. Those rare moments of complete presence. Time drops away. There's no past, no future, just now. Those moments don't feel short or long, they feel eternal. And the irony is, this kind of presence only arises when we accept how temporary we are. It's not about living longer, it's about living deeper. Eternity doesn't lie ahead, it lies within. Instead of climbing horizontally across time, we go vertically into depth. Maybe that's what we're really longing for when we want to be remembered. Not endless existence, but a moment that feels eternal. A feeling that this matters beyond time, and if that's the case, the path isn't legacy, it's presence. By accepting that you'll be forgotten, you clear away the very thing that blocks you from this experience. You stop trading the richness of now for the fantasy of future memory. And in doing so, you begin to uncover hidden dimensions of experience that were once obscured by fear of impermanence. You discover that eternity isn't a reward you earn after death. It's something you touch during life through full presence. Part 51. The courage of impermanence. True courage isn't found in building things that last forever. It's found in creating beauty that you know will vanish. It takes real bravery to invest your heart in something temporary. Think of the ice sculptor who shapes a masterpiece destined to melt, or the monk who builds a mandala, only to sweep it away when it's done. There's a special kind of valor in that, to care deeply about something knowing it won't last. And this bravery doesn't just apply to art, it applies to love, to experience, to life itself. It takes strength to open your heart to people you know you'll lose, to immerse yourself in moments you know you can't keep. But maybe that's the greatest act of courage, to love fully, to live fully, to create fully, while accepting the inevitable loss baked into the experience. This paradox of full engagement and full surrender is a profound spiritual posture. It's the meeting point of vitality and wisdom. By accepting that you'll be forgotten, you cultivate this courage. You no longer need permanence to justify beauty. You become someone who can live, love, and create, not because it will last, but because it matters now. And in doing so, you unlock a kind of joy and depth that was once held back by fear. You discover that embracing impermanence is not weakness, it's strength. The kind of strength that sets your spirit free. Part 52, the weight of memory. Memory, individually and collectively, can become a heavy weight. Over time, the past can pile up until it starts to block the future. Think about cultures trapped in cycles of remembering, clinging to past glory or past wounds. They become stuck, unable to grow or adapt because they're so entangled in how things used to be. And it happens personally too. Our memories, our identities, our stories about who we've been can start to limit who we're allowed to become. We begin living as curators of a museum, afraid to disrupt the exhibit of our remembered self. Our past achievements and failures become a cage. We stop acting spontaneously. We become careful, predictable, locked into who we think we are because of what we've already done. But when you accept that you'll be forgotten, you start to release that weight. You realize you don't need to carry it anymore. You don't have to keep being the person your past says you are. You don't have to live a consistent story just to be legible to others. You're free to evolve, to change, to shed old layers and write new chapters. And in that freedom, something surprising happens. Vitality returns. Creativity comes back. Possibility opens up. You discover that forgetting, by others and even by yourself, isn't a threat to identity. It's the very soil from which new life can grow. Part 53, the mathematics of memory. Let's step back for a moment, zoom way out, and look at memory through the lens of math. Across human generations, the math is sobering. At most people are remembered for 2 generations after their death. Even the famous, those whose names seem etched in stone, fade within a few centuries. Now multiply that by the billions of lives that have been lived. The sheer volume makes it mathematically impossible to remember everyone. For each name we preserve, there are countless that must be forgotten, and then it gets even starker. Zoom out again, this time to cosmic time. Human civilization itself occupies a microscopic sliver of the universe's timeline. The whole history of our species, a blink, a flicker, maybe less. Now ask, what are the chances that any one person, you or me, will be remembered after the extinction of our species? The math says nearly 0. Even if humanity lives for millions more years, the odds of your name surviving are infinitesimal. But here's the strange beauty in that. By accepting this, by seeing remembrance as mathematically impossible, you stop resisting reality. You align yourself with the actual shape of things, and instead of despair, you might find relief. A quiet comfort, because what felt like harsh truth begins to feel like homecoming, like finally resting inside something vast and honest. You stop struggling to matter forever and start participating in something larger than you ever imagined. Part 54, the joy of contribution. There's a kind of joy that doesn't depend on being remembered at all. It's the joy of knowing you contributed, not for credit, not for applause, just for the impact itself. You felt it, like when you give someone a helping hand anonymously. No one knows. No one thanks you, but deep inside, something feels right. There's a purity in that kind of giving, an authenticity that remembered acts sometimes lack. And this joy of contribution isn't just material. It shows up in the ideas you share, the love you offer, the beauty you create. A teacher feels it when a student thrives, even if they don't remember where they first learned the lesson. An artist feels it when their work moves someone, even if the viewer never learns their name. A parent feels it when values echo through generations of descendants they'll never meet. When you let go of the need to be remembered, this joy becomes fully available. You start giving for the sake of giving, and something unlocks. Your full capacity for impact gets released, because you're no longer limited by needing recognition. You discover a deeper form of fulfillment, influence without ownership, legacy without label. Part 55, the ownership illusion. Our need to be remembered often comes from a deeper illusion, the belief that our life, our work, our impact truly belongs to us. We say my story, my success, my legacy as if we built them alone, but look closer. Every achievement rests on invisible foundations: inherited language, shared knowledge, collective labor, the chance circumstances of time and place. None of us creates in a vacuum. Even our most personal expressions come through borrowed words, shaped by ideas we didn't invent. And if you trace anything far enough, you'll find it's not just yours, it's a tapestry, woven with countless hands. Even the self that craves remembrance, that too is a construction, built from the people who raised you, the culture you absorbed, the relationships that shaped you. So when you accept that you'll be forgotten, something else happens too. You release the illusion of ownership. You stop needing to possess what you've done. You begin to see your life as part of something larger, a collective wave of creation flowing through time. And in that recognition, gratitude emerges. Connection deepens. You stop worrying about what's yours to be remembered for, and start reveling in the fact that you got to participate at all. Part 56, the ultimate privacy. Being forgotten isn't just loss, it's a return. A return to a kind of privacy we rarely acknowledge because to be remembered is, in some way, to be defined. Remembrance condenses a life into a story, a neat version simplified for others to understand. It's never the full truth, it can't be, and yet that remembered version sticks. It becomes a character, your character, in someone else's narrative. But when you're forgotten, you're released from that script, you return to something deeper than persona, something undivided, something mysterious. That's the ultimate privacy. Not erasure, but freedom from being pinned down. Freedom from interpretation, judgment, categorization. Maybe what we fear isn't non-existence. Maybe what we're afraid of losing is that familiar identity, even if it was never the whole story. But in that loss lies something sacred, the return to your being, not your image. Not what you seem to be, but what you were beyond words. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you begin to approach this ultimate privacy with curiosity. You see it not as disappearance, but as arrival into a realm untouched by the eyes of others, and in that quiet you might find peace. Part 57, the quantum of influence. Our names may fade, but our influence often doesn't. Think of it like quantum physics. Some particles affect systems without being seen. Influence without observation, action without traceable source, you work the same way. A kind word today might ripple outward into someone's life, shaping choices and thoughts they never connect back to you. Your support of one person might free them to help someone else, and that person helps another. And on, generation after generation, far beyond what you can measure or witness. These effects continue without remembrance. In fact, they sometimes work better without your name attached. This is the quantum nature of human influence. Causal chains intertwine, creating change you can't track or claim. By accepting that you'll be forgotten, you begin to focus less on ownership and more on impact. You stop needing to tag your contributions with your name, and in doing so, your influence expands. You're no longer limited by recognition. You become part of something much bigger than legacy. You discover that your existence continues in ways that don't depend on memory at all. Part 58, the wisdom of trees. Consider the trees. Every autumn, they drop their leaves onto the forest floor, without signature, without pride. Those leaves decay, they become soil, and from that soil, new life grows. The tree doesn't need credit. It doesn't ask that its leaves be remembered. It contributes quietly, anonymously, and lets go. This wisdom isn't just in trees, it's everywhere in nature. Rivers feed oceans without signing their name. Clouds release rain without claiming authorship. Nature works through cycles, not signatures. Through transformation, not preservation. And we are part of nature too. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you begin to move like the forest. You create, contribute, nourish, without needing to be known as the source. And this shift often brings a surprising comfort, a deep ecological peace. You realize you're participating in patterns much older than memory. And in those patterns, forgetting isn't failure, it's necessary, it's sacred. You discover that being forgotten isn't a tragedy. It's how nature continues. Part 59, the illusion of permanence. What we call permanent is often just something moving slowly enough to fool us. Mountains seem eternal, until you learn they're rising and eroding at the same time. Stars burn for billions of years, but they die too. And even the most enduring human structures, the pyramids, the Great Wall, show their wear when you look closely. Wind, sand, time, they soften everything. They always have. That's the truth we tend to avoid. Nothing is truly permanent. Everything, stone, memory, even civilizations exist in some stage of change or decay. And that includes remembrance. The names carved in monuments will fade, just like the stone they're etched into. Our digital records, subject to physical decay too, corruption, obsolescence, entropy. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you stop resisting this reality. You stop fighting against the very nature of existence. And instead, something surprising happens. A strange peace enters. You see that forgetting isn't a personal failure. It's not a flaw in human nature. It's part of cosmic rhythm. The constant movement from form to dissolution, from presence to absence. What once felt cruel now just feels natural. Part 60, the freedom of completion. Maybe what makes something whole is the fact that it ends. Think about your favorite stories. They don't go on forever. They stop. They resolve. The final chapter, the last chord, the silence after the music. That's what gives meaning to everything before it. In that light, being forgotten isn't a tragedy. It's the closing line of your life's song. A final cadence, a moment of rest. Without it, your story would just loop endlessly, unfinished, unresolved. But when you accept forgetting as the final punctuation, everything leading up to it feels complete. Like a song that knows when to stop. Like a painting that doesn't need another brushstroke. And when you let go of the need to continue indefinitely, you open yourself to a different kind of freedom, the freedom of completion. It's the satisfaction of knowing your part has been played, your note has been sung, and now the silence has meaning. Part 61, the gift of absence. Absence can be a gift. Just like silence gives shape to music, forgetting makes space for something new to emerge. Innovation rarely happens in crowded rooms. It needs space. It needs the clearing of memory, the loosening of fixed patterns to make way for something original. It's not just individuals who benefit from forgetting. Whole societies do too. Art movements, cultural revolutions, creative renaissances, they often begin when memory loosens its grip, when the weight of tradition lifts just enough to allow experimentation. And by accepting that you'll be forgotten, you offer that gift. You leave behind fertile emptiness for the future to grow into. You make room consciously for those yet to come. And in doing so, you participate in creativity itself, not by filling space, but by vacating it. Part 62, the natural cycle. Forgetting isn't unnatural, it's essential. Just like death, it completes a cycle. It resets the system. It makes way for life to continue. Now imagine the opposite. What if nothing was ever forgotten? What if memory kept stacking forever? It would be suffocating. There would be no room for change, no space for newness. Eternal memory would be a form of stagnation, a museum with no exit. That's why forgetting is built into us. Our minds let go of old information to take in new. They clear space for change, for evolution. Without forgetting, even thinking would grind to a halt. So when you accept that you'll be forgotten, you align with nature. You flow with its cycles, emergence, fading, renewal. And in that alignment, you find ecological peace. You're no longer resisting nature. You're part of it. You realize that forgetting isn't something we must overcome. It's something that carries us forward. Part 63, the mystery of influence. Your influence doesn't end where your memory does. It keeps moving through strange, invisible channels. You might say something today that changes someone years from now, who then passes it on to someone else. All without ever connecting it back to you. Maybe you use a phrase from your great-grandmother, a woman you never met, or a gesture that's passed through generations without a name attached. These influences live beyond our awareness, beyond conscious memory, and often that's where they're most powerful. Cultural traditions, languages, art forms, they're built from layers of forgotten creators. Their fingerprints are everywhere, but their names are long gone. So when you accept that you'll be forgotten, you get to take part in this mystery. This quiet, anonymous stream of human development, you no longer need to tag your impact. You just let it flow, and in that letting go, you often find the deepest satisfaction, not from being recognized, but from knowing you mattered, even if no one knows how. Part 64, the trap of legacy. Legacy sounds noble until it starts to rob your present. Connection for status, and at the end, the applause fades, but the loneliness echoes. This is the trap of legacy. It seduces creators, leaders, even everyday people. You start making choices not from joy or truth, but from fear of being forgotten. The writer trying to be immortal rarely writes anything alive. The artist painting for the gallery loses touch with the raw impulse that moves people. Legacy, when pursued too directly, becomes a mirage. But when you accept that you'll be forgotten, something opens. You return to your real reasons for creating. You speak from necessity. You love without audience. And then, paradoxically, your work might actually last. Not because you forced it, but because you let go. Part 65, the equality of oblivion. There is a strange, quiet justice in forgetting. No matter who you were, the celebrated or the unknown, time forgets everyone. The pharaoh and the slave, the conqueror and the conquered, all eventually fade into the same obscurity. Even the most revered historical names blur over time, their stories thin, their details slip away. Given enough centuries, even the giants become footnotes, and then nothing. But this is not something to mourn. In fact, this equality of oblivion might be one of the most profound forms of justice the universe offers. It levels everything. It dissolves status. It says, you mattered and so did everyone else. By accepting that you'll be forgotten, you step into this equality. You recognize the temporary nature of fame, status, and recognition. And in that recognition, a new compassion arises for others still trapped in the climb. You discover that shared forgetting is not isolation. It's a common destiny, a bond that connects every human soul in quiet, final kinship. Part 66, the freedom of anonymity. There's a kind of freedom that only anonymity can offer. When no one's watching, when no one knows who did what, we act from something deeper. Something unfiltered. Intrinsic motivation takes over. Think about the way you behave when you know no one will remember it. The smile you give, the kindness you extend, the way you move through the world becomes more honest, more alive. Now imagine living your whole life from that space, as if you were already anonymous, already forgotten. You no longer perform for the future. You no longer craft yourself for legacy. Instead, you act from truth, from presence, from value. When you accept that all your actions will eventually become authorless, a kind of pressure lifts. You start creating, loving, building, not to be remembered, but because it feels right. And in that freedom, creativity awakens, authenticity returns. You live as if recognition doesn't matter, because it doesn't. Part 67, the distortion of memory. Even if you're remembered for a while, it won't be you that's remembered. Because memory, whether personal or historical, doesn't preserve, it reshapes, it edits. It forgets more than it recalls. Over time, people become symbols, stories, simplified versions of themselves. Even your loved ones will remember you imperfectly. And that's not their fault. It's the nature of memory. It recreates the past through the lens of the present, always. So the project of being accurately remembered is doomed from the start. But there's peace in that realization when you accept that not only will you be forgotten, but even remembered wrongly while remembered at all, you can finally release the pressure. You stop needing to be perfectly seen because it's not possible. Instead, you turn toward impact, toward love, toward transformation, toward what matters even if your name never survives it. Part 68, the dance of remembering and forgetting. Memory and forgetting aren't enemies, they're partners, dancers in a cosmic rhythm. Without forgetting, memory becomes rigid, stuck. Without memory, forgetting becomes chaos. Together, they create movement, growth. Meaning, think of creativity. It depends on remembered patterns, but also on forgetting just enough of them to try something new. Think of healing. It requires memory to understand the wound, but forgetting to release its grip. Forgetting isn't a failure of memory, it's memory's companion. It's what allows us to adapt, evolve, begin again. So when you accept that you will be forgotten, you're not stepping out of the dance, you're stepping into it. You become part of the pulse, the motion, the living flow of presence and release. And with that, forgetting becomes something beautiful, a gift, not a grief. Part 69, the continuity of elements. Your name will vanish, your story will fade, but you don't disappear. Because what made you, the atoms, the energy, the elemental pieces, those endure. Those continue. The carbon in your bones, it was once in stars, in dinosaurs, in trees. In oceans, it will be in others long after you're gone. This is a different kind of continuation. Not one of identity or biography, but of essence. Your arrangement dissolves, but the materials reorganize. What seems like an ending is just a new formation, a next chapter in the dance of matter and energy. When you accept that you will be forgotten, you open your eyes to this other kind of immortality, one of transformation. You are not lost. You are recycled into everything, and that's not small. That's eternal. Part 70, the renewal of wonder. Maybe the most beautiful thing about accepting forgetting is what it gives you back. Wonder. When you stop chasing legacy, when you no longer need to be remembered, your attention returns to the present. You finally notice the miracle of simply being here, because it is a miracle. The taste of food, the warmth of sunlight, the sound of someone laughing, the quiet between your breaths. All of it becomes extraordinary again. Even pain gains texture, even sadness gains depth. You're no longer rushing past life trying to preserve it, you're actually experiencing it. This is the gift of forgetting, not just what it erases, but what it reveals. It makes each moment sharper, brighter, more alive, because when nothing has to last, everything matters more. Part 71. The invitation to play. When you accept that you will be forgotten, it invites you to be more playful and open to trying new things. Once you stop worrying about leaving a lasting legacy, the serious pressure to be remembered can be replaced with a lighter approach, one that focuses on enjoying the moment. Think about how children behave. They don't care about being remembered. And because of that, they often get lost in what they're doing with full excitement and joy. The little things they make or do, things that may not last, are often full of life in a way adult work can sometimes lack. This kind of playfulness isn't just for kids, it can apply to everything in adult life, like work, relationships, or creativity. When you stop worrying about how people will remember you, those areas become more like playgrounds where you can freely try things out. A person who stops focusing on building a fancy resume and starts solving interesting problems often ends up doing work that matters more. An artist who stops chasing long-term fame and starts enjoying the act of creating usually makes art that feels more alive. By accepting that people will forget you, you can take this as a reason to live playfully. You approach different areas of life with curiosity and openness, instead of stress about being remembered. This change often opens up creative energy and problem-solving abilities that were blocked by trying too hard to be taken seriously. You learn that being playful doesn't mean you won't achieve things. In fact, it might help you achieve more, because you're not stuck worrying about how your work will be remembered. Part 72, the value of experience. Maybe the only thing that really matters is how deeply and fully you feel your own experiences. Not how long they last, and not whether people remember them, but how rich and full they are while they're happening. Think about how one moment of being fully present and aware can sometimes feel more valuable than years spent half distracted. That kind of moment holds its worth without needing to lead to anything else. The true value of being conscious doesn't depend on other people noticing. It stands on its own. It doesn't need anyone else to see it for it to be meaningful. A moment of real joy or insight or connection is meaningful just because it happened, whether or not anyone remembers it later. The experience itself is complete, and it doesn't need anything outside of it to prove its value. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, it helps you pay attention to what really matters, how things feel when they happen. You start caring more about depth than about how long something lasts, more about how it feels than about whether it will be remembered. This change in priorities can turn even simple moments into something special, just by removing the pressure to make them last or be remembered. You realize that when your attention isn't split between living something and trying to keep it alive in memory, even a single moment can feel fuller than years of distracted time. Part 73. The intimacy of impermanence. Knowing that everything is temporary can create a special kind of closeness between people. When we accept that we and everyone we know will one day be forgotten, it brings a gentle awareness of our shared fragility. Think about how realizing that we're all going to die someday can make us feel more connected, not less. When we see that life is short for everyone, our similarities start to matter more than our differences. This feeling of closeness doesn't only happen with people. It can extend to anything that doesn't last. A cherry blossom, a sunset, the change of seasons, they all become like relatives in the way they appear for a short time and then pass. Maybe the strongest connection we can feel with the world comes not from what stays the same, but from what fades, from the fact that we are all part of a cycle of appearing and disappearing. This awareness of our bond with things that don't last often brings out a soft, caring feeling toward everything that's temporary. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you gain access to this feeling of closeness that comes from knowing everything passes. You feel a deeper connection with all things that don't last. This kind of understanding can change how you relate to others, because it allows you to be more open and vulnerable. You realize that when we share the reality of being forgotten, we open up new ways to connect that don't exist when we're trying to avoid that truth. Part 74, the lightness of being. There's a special feeling of freedom that comes when you stop worrying about being remembered. The weight of worrying about how future people might judge you gets lifted, and that makes it easier to move freely through life. Think about how much of your energy goes into thinking about what people might think of you in the future. We're constantly adjusting what we say and do based on what we imagine others will think later. But this feeling of lightness isn't just about what others see, it also changes how you treat yourself. Trying to build and protect a version of yourself that will be remembered takes up a lot of mental and emotional effort. When you let go of that goal, you're free to explore sides of yourself that you may have hidden before because they didn't fit your rememberable image. The strict idea of who you're supposed to be can start to loosen, and you can become more flexible and responsive. By accepting that you'll be forgotten, you can feel this lightness that comes from no longer carrying the pressure to be remembered. You let go of the need to perform for people in the future. This feeling of being unburdened often brings a sudden increase in energy, creativity, and joy. You find that what once seemed like a terrifying thought, not being remembered, can actually feel like a relief and a kind of freedom if you fully accept it. Part 75. The Wisdom of Insignificance. Real wisdom might begin when you recognize how small you are in the grand scheme of things. But instead of making you feel hopeless, this view gives you a clearer and more honest way to understand yourself and your place in the world. Many wise teachings from different traditions start with this idea, from Socrates admitting he doesn't know everything, to the Buddhist idea that there is no fixed self. Wisdom often begins with realizing what we're not. This kind of wisdom doesn't make you feel less valuable. It helps you understand your true value more clearly. When you let go of the idea that you're hugely important in the grand universe, you may start to see where your real importance lies. Maybe your value isn't in being remembered forever, but in the real difference you make to others during the short time you're here. That kind of down-to-earth meaning can feel more satisfying than chasing big, empty ideas about legacy. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you open up to this kind of grounded wisdom. You keep adjusting how you see yourself to match the truth, that you're temporary and limited, but still meaningful. This change slowly reshapes how you think about success, failure, praise, and criticism. You realize that when your self-image is accurate, you're not weakened. You're actually stronger, because you're no longer thrown off by false ideas or outside pressure. Part 76, the appreciation of finitude. Maybe the most precious part of life isn't how long it lasts, but that it's limited. The fact that our experience doesn't go on forever is what gives it intensity and meaning. Think about how rare things, like special materials, limited time offers, or short seasons, often feel more valuable just because they don't last. Your short time in this world works the same way. It becomes more meaningful because it's limited. This idea doesn't just apply to your physical life. It also applies to the fact that you'll be remembered for only a short time. Knowing that people will eventually forget you adds another layer of rarity, which can make your time feel even more meaningful. The short period when those who knew you still remember you might be especially important because it doesn't last forever. Like flowers that bloom briefly, this limited window of remembrance might get its beauty from its shortness. By accepting that you'll be forgotten, you can start to really value the limited nature of all experience. You stop seeing limits as problems and start seeing them as the very things that give life meaning. This change often turns your struggle against time into gratitude for how time shapes what matters. You learn that being forgotten, like dying, doesn't take meaning away. Instead, it creates the space in which meaning becomes possible. Part 77, the authenticity of temporality. Maybe the truest way to live is to accept, not deny, that our time here is limited. Real authenticity comes when we stop fighting this truth and start living in line with it. Think about how much energy we waste trying to pretend we're permanent, trying to build a legacy that will last forever. That effort pulls us away from the present, making us value a made-up future more than the real now. But this honesty about being temporary doesn't only affect our own minds. It also changes how we relate to others and what we create. When we face the fact that all things, relationships, creations, moments, are temporary, we can engage with them in a more truthful way. Relationships that are valued for what they offer right now often go deeper than those held onto just for the idea of lasting forever. Projects done for their own worth, not just for a lasting impact, often end up being more genuine and meaningful. By accepting that you'll be forgotten, you start living in line with the truth of human life, that everything passes. You stop resisting the way things are, and instead live in honest connection with your real condition. This shift often dissolves that quiet but constant discomfort that comes from pretending life works differently than it does. You come to see that authenticity doesn't come from being remembered, but from truly facing and embracing the fact that nothing lasts. Part 78, the gift of transience. What if being forgotten isn't a punishment, but a gift? Not a sign of failure, but a kind of grace, a release from the pressure of keeping your identity alive forever? Think about how tiring it would be to keep up the same version of yourself for all eternity. The endless effort to be consistent and understandable could turn into a kind of torture, rather than the peaceful reward we imagine eternal fame might be. This gift of being temporary doesn't just help us personally, it helps society too. Imagine a culture that never forgot anything, that kept repeating the same old names and patterns. That society would get stuck, weighed down by the past, and would struggle to adapt to what's new. Forgetting allows for growth and fresh starts, both for people and for cultures. When you accept that you will be forgotten, you can begin to see this forgetting as a gift, something that frees you rather than something to fear. You stop seeing forgetting as a punishment waiting in the future and start to see it as a quiet kind of freedom. This new way of seeing things can shift your relationship with legacy from anxious clinging to peaceful letting go. You begin to realize that what once seemed like an existential threat, the idea of being forgotten, can, from a wide enough view, look like a kind of cosmic blessing. Part 79, the freedom of ordinariness. There's a powerful kind of freedom in accepting that you're simply ordinary. Not in a sad or hopeless way, but as a way of feeling connected to the billions of people who have lived and been forgotten. Think about how self-centered it is to expect your life to be remembered forever when almost everyone else in history has been forgotten. This idea that you deserve to be remembered causes needless pain, especially when reality doesn't match that expectation. The freedom that comes from being ordinary isn't just about legacy. It can change everything. When we let go of the need to be extraordinary, we open ourselves to the true richness of everyday life. Simple things, a meal, a conversation, a walk, become more beautiful when you're not always chasing something bigger. Strangely, once you stop chasing the extraordinary, you often begin to see how extraordinary the ordinary actually is. By accepting that you'll be forgotten, you also accept your deep connection to the rest of ordinary humanity. You let go of the stress that comes with always trying to stand out and be remembered. This kind of acceptance often brings an immediate sense of peace and relief. You realize that being ordinary and forgotten can actually give you more space to live honestly than constantly striving to be remembered ever could. Part 80, the return to essence. Being forgotten doesn't have to mean disappearing forever. It can mean returning to your original undefined nature. It's not just an end, but a return to the open potential you came from. Think about how putting a label or memory on something always shrinks it a little. It turns a rich, mysterious experience into a neat little concept. To be forgotten is to be set free from those definitions, to go back to being something open and limitless. This idea of returning to your essence isn't about loss. It's about completion. Like finishing a full journey. Like a river flowing back into the ocean, your individual identity returns to the larger source it came from. Maybe this return isn't a tragedy, but a kind of homecoming, a peaceful end to a temporary separation. The journey doesn't end by holding on to individual identity forever. It ends by letting it go. By accepting that you'll be forgotten, you can begin to look forward to this return, not fear it. You see it not as being erased, but as finishing something deeply whole. This change in how you think can turn forgetting from something scary into something peaceful, maybe even beautiful. You find that what once looked like a loss might actually be a gain. The return to your deeper, original self, beyond all labels and identities. Part 81, the quantum of identity. Maybe your sense of self isn't one long, unbroken thing, but a bunch of separate moments held together by a story. It's not a solid identity, but a chain of different experiences that we link together through memory and narrative. Think about how we build our sense of who we are by stitching together separate memories into a single flowing story. That story is useful. It helps us live and function, but it might not reflect how our awareness really works. From this view, your identity is more like a flickering light, on and off, not a solid flame. So when we're forgotten, it doesn't destroy something real. It just acknowledges what was already true all along. That steady, continuous self we want to be remembered never actually existed as one smooth thing. It was always just a helpful story we told ourselves, placed on top of experiences that weren't connected on their own. Forgetting allows that story to dissolve, and what's left is the reality we always lived with, but rarely saw. By accepting that you will be forgotten, you start to live in line with this flickering, moment-based version of identity. You see that your need to be remembered comes from trying to hold together something that was never truly whole. And this realization can free you from the constant pressure to keep your life story neat and impressive. You discover that forgetting doesn't cover up your real nature, it reveals it once the make-believe story fades away. Part 82, the economy of attention. All memory works inside a limited system where attention must be spent carefully, and not everything can be remembered. For someone or something to be remembered, countless others have to be forgotten, just because our minds can only hold so much. Even in one lifetime, we clearly remember only certain moments, which means others must be forgotten. Memory doesn't hold on to everything, it works by picking out a few things and letting the rest fade. This idea also applies to cultural memory. No society can hold equal attention on every event or person from the past. So, what we call history isn't a full record. It's a carefully chosen set of names and stories. For some things to be remembered, others must be let go. Not because anyone is trying to erase them, but because we simply can't remember everything. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you see that this forgetting is part of a natural and necessary process. You accept that there are limits built into the way memory works, for both people and cultures. This understanding can help you feel less bitter and more compassionate toward the systems of memory that can't include everyone. You come to see that forgetting isn't failure. It's part of the very process that makes memory possible at all. Part 83, the paradox of legacy. There's a strange twist in how people chase legacy and how legacy is actually made. Those who are most desperate to be remembered often end up doing things that make them easier to forget. Think about how being too focused on legacy can lead to self-conscious work that lacks the honesty needed to truly last. An artist who creates just to be remembered rarely makes work powerful enough to be remembered at all. This same pattern shows up in more than just art. It happens in all areas of life. A leader who constantly worries about how history will judge them often makes worse choices than one focused on what people need right now. A scientist obsessed with getting credit might miss the shared insights that lead to real discovery. In so many human efforts, the desire to be remembered often blocks the very traits that would make someone worth remembering. By accepting that you will be forgotten, you place yourself on the better side of this paradox. You create, lead, or explore without being shaped by the fear or need for future recognition. Letting go of the pressure to be remembered often unlocks a kind of real engagement and creativity that has lasting impact. You discover that by releasing your grip on legacy, you ironically open yourself up to creating work that actually has a chance to endure. Part 84, the courage of acceptance. True courage might not be about fighting to be remembered, but about bravely accepting that you won't be. This isn't about giving up, but about seeing reality clearly, which takes more strength than we often admit. Think about how much easier it is to believe comforting stories about legacy than to face the obvious truth that all of us will be forgotten. To confront that truth head-on takes a quiet kind of bravery that few acknowledge, but that can deeply change a life. This courage makes space for living with real presence instead of always performing for people who don't exist yet. When we stop trying to impress future generations, we're free to respond honestly to what's in front of us. The person who has accepted being forgotten acts with a different kind of strength, more direct, more truthful, less concerned about how things look. This kind of straightforwardness can have more impact than actions carefully planned to earn long-term praise. By accepting that you'll be forgotten, you begin to practice this deep and powerful kind of courage. You face something that most people run from and find a new kind of freedom in doing so. This shift doesn't just change how you think about legacy, it can change how you relate to life itself. You realize that the bravery to accept forgetting also creates the ability to be truly present in every part of life. Part 85, the weight of remembrance. Think about how heavy it would actually be to be remembered forever, the way so many people wish to be. The constant pressure of being judged, the inability to change because of the image you've left behind. Many well-known people have described how their fame becomes a trap, a prison made of their public image. Now imagine that pressure going on forever. That's the burden of eternal remembrance. It wouldn't just weigh down the person remembered, it would also burden those doing the remembering. Feeling forced to carry the memory of someone long gone can stop people from fully living in the present. Cultures that place too much focus on honoring ancestors often struggle to adapt and grow. People can become stuck in the past, using all their energy to maintain old memories. By accepting that you will be forgotten, you free both yourself and others from this burden. You let go of the need to always present yourself in a certain way, and you let others off the hook from having to keep your memory alive. This shared release often gives back a sense of energy and openness that was trapped by pressure and obligation. You begin to see forgetting not as a failure, but as freedom, the chance to stop preserving and start growing again. Part 86. The ecology of identity. Your identity doesn't exist all by itself. It's part of a bigger web of relationships and connections. You're not a fixed, separate person, but one piece of a constantly changing system that includes other people, places, and culture. Think about how your sense of self forms through interaction. It's shaped by conversations, environments, and shared experiences. Your identity doesn't live on its own, but comes together temporarily from all these influences crossing paths. Seen this way, being forgotten isn't about being erased. It's about being changed and reshaped. The parts of you that made up you don't disappear. They just take new forms and continue in different ways. Like nutrients cycling through nature, your experiences and influence move through the system, even after your name is gone. What looks like vanishing from one angle is actually just shifting into a new shape from another. By accepting that you'll be forgotten, you begin to see yourself this way, as part of something flowing and alive, not something static and preserved. You stop needing to see yourself as a permanent object and instead understand your identity as a moment in a larger process. This perspective often brings a peaceful sense of belonging, like you're part of a natural cycle. You realize that forgetting isn't destruction. It's your participation in the ever-changing flow of life that sustains everything. Part 87. The horizon of meaning. Maybe true meaning doesn't come from being remembered forever, but from the meaning we find during our own lives. Not a legacy that others preserve, but a pattern that we ourselves live and feel. Think about how much significance we find in the relationships and moments we personally experience. These meanings are real and complete, even if no one else ever knows about them. They don't need to be saved or celebrated in the future to have value now. This kind of personal meaning lives within the horizon of your own lifetime. It finds depth in shared experiences, even if they end when your life does. A parent's love for their child doesn't need to be remembered by history to be deeply important. An insight that changes your worldview doesn't need to be written down to matter. By accepting that you will be forgotten, you focus on what matters to you now, not on how it will be remembered later. You invest in the moments and meanings you can see and feel from where you are. And this often brings more fulfillment than chasing meaning that depends on being remembered. You come to see that real meaning, lived and known in the present, can be stronger and more lasting than anything preserved after you're gone. Part 88, the quality of time. Maybe time shouldn't be measured by how long something lasts, but by how deeply it's experienced. It's not about duration, it's about presence, about how fully we live each moment. A single moment of full attention might hold more true experience than years spent distracted. This kind of time, measured in depth, works separately from clocks and calendars. When you look at time this way, the idea of being forgotten stops being so scary. If what matters is the quality of experience, then how long it's remembered doesn't define its value. An intense, deeply lived life doesn't need to continue after death to have been worth living. By accepting that you'll be forgotten, you begin to shift from trying to stretch time out to filling it fully. You focus on the deep dimension of time, on presence, energy, and wholeness, rather than just trying to extend the timeline. This change in focus can completely shift how you experience even the most ordinary moments. You discover that one fully lived moment is more valuable than entire centuries that are remembered but never truly felt. Part 89. The liberation from history. History can become a kind of prison, locking us into the stories, roles, and expectations that were formed in the past. And strangely, the desire to be remembered often becomes a longing not for freedom, but to join the ranks of our jailers. Think about how historical narratives shape our imagination. They define what's possible based on what's already been recorded. To be forgotten, then, can mean freedom from those limits. It returns us to possibility, to futures not yet scripted. This kind of liberation isn't just personal, it's also cultural. Societies, just like individuals, need to forget in order to grow. When a culture lets go of outdated ideas or patterns that no longer serve its people, it makes space for something new. In fact, forgetting, at least partially, is essential for innovation. Without it, both individuals and cultures become stuck, rigid, unchanging. By accepting that you will be forgotten, you take part in this greater freedom. You stop seeing forgetting as failure and start seeing it as something necessary and healthy. This shift in thinking often changes how you relate to your own story. and to the larger story of your culture. You begin to realize that being forgotten doesn't mean you're excluded from history. It means you've contributed to the vital process that keeps history alive, fluid, and free. Part 90, the ownership fallacy. Wanting to be remembered usually comes from a deeper idea, that we somehow own our identities, our lives, our achievements. And we want that ownership to continue even after we're gone, carried forward through remembrance. But when you look closely, this idea of owning anything after death becomes strange. How can someone who no longer exists hold a claim to anything, even memory? This mistaken idea of ownership stretches to the things we create, our ideas, our works, our influence. But the truth is, every human achievement is the product of countless contributions, most of them forgotten. The person who gets the credit, the so-called inventor or artist, is really just the visible part of a much bigger web. What we call individual success is always born from collective effort, most of which never gets acknowledged. By accepting that you'll be forgotten, you begin letting go of this idea that you own your legacy. You start to see your contributions not as personal possessions, but as moments you helped shape. And that realization often brings humility and a quiet gratitude that replaces the need for credit. You discover that by giving up the need for recognition, you gain the freedom to truly contribute without being weighed down by who gets remembered. Part 91, the gift of obscurity. Obscurity, the state of being unknown, can be a gift, not a punishment. It brings a kind of freedom that people who are constantly watched can't access. Public figures often speak longingly about the freedom they had before fame. The ability to try, to fail, to grow without being judged or recorded. That freedom is essential for true growth and honest creativity. And this gift doesn't just apply to life, it continues after death. Being forgotten protects you from being reduced to a myth by people who never knew you. Your work, your actions, can be received on their own terms, not filtered through someone else's version of your life story. The work gets to breathe, free of the distortion that comes from trying to fit a person into a narrative. By accepting that you will be forgotten, you begin to receive that freedom now. You create with the knowledge that obscurity is coming and that it's okay. That awareness often unlocks something deep, a capacity for honesty that legacy anxiety tends to suppress. You discover that the gift of obscurity, if you welcome it, gives you more space to do work that truly matters. Work not limited by the need to be remembered. Part 92, the wholeness of being. Maybe what we truly long for isn't to be remembered, but to feel whole. Not split between the present and some imagined future, but fully gathered into each moment. When you're truly present, all the scattered parts of yourself seem to come into alignment. There's a brief but powerful harmony, and it doesn't need to last forever to be real. This sense of wholeness doesn't come from being seen or remembered. It comes from inside, from feeling like your actions match your deepest values. That internal alignment is complete in itself. It doesn't need to be extended through memory to be meaningful. By accepting that you'll be forgotten, you remove one of the biggest barriers to this kind of presence. You stop splitting your attention between what you're doing now and how it might be remembered later. And this brings immediate relief, a kind of peace, and a stronger connection to your life. You discover that real fulfillment doesn't come from being remembered across time. It comes from being fully alive, fully whole, right now. Part 93, the mystery of being. Maybe the greatest gift of being conscious is getting to take part in the mystery of existence itself. Not to explain it, but just to be part of it. But our obsession with being remembered often pulls us away from that mystery. We get so focused on trying to extend our presence into the future that we forget how miraculous it is to simply exist at all. To be aware, to feel, to think, that in itself is a kind of miracle. And this mystery isn't something that needs solving. It asks only that we notice it, that we experience it with awe. Why is there something instead of nothing? That question alone opens the door to wonder, and it points us toward a truth bigger than identity, bigger than legacy. To be even briefly is to touch that mystery. By accepting that you will be forgotten, you return your attention to that fundamental mystery. You stop chasing secondary concerns and begin seeing what's always been right in front of you. This shift in attention reveals beauty, depth, and meaning that legacy obsession hides. You discover that even if your life is short and forgotten, the fact that you were is enough to make it sacred. Part 94, the wisdom of letting go. In the natural world, letting go isn't failure, it's wisdom. It's not defeat. It's the natural way things complete themselves. Trees let go of their leaves in fall. Rivers let go of their waters to the sea. These acts of release allow for renewal, not ruin. This same wisdom applies to us. We grow by letting go of what we were. The child must be partially forgotten for the adult to emerge. And the adult must be partially forgotten for the elder to come into being. Every stage of life involves a dance between remembering and forgetting. It holds on just enough and lets go of the rest. Without that balance, we become stuck, trapped in preservation instead of growth. By accepting that you'll be forgotten, you align yourself with this deep wisdom. You see forgetting not as something tragic, but as the completion of your cycle. This realization often brings a sense of peace, an ecological sense of rightness. You discover that being forgotten isn't failure or punishment. It's your way of participating in the timeless rhythm of life, a rhythm that knows when to hold on and when to let go. Part 95, Return to Source. Maybe being forgotten isn't about disappearing forever. Maybe it's about returning to the place we originally came from, the unseen source that gave us life for a little while. It's not about ending, but finishing a journey from being nothing to becoming something and then going back again. Many spiritual and wisdom traditions describe this cycle, coming into form and going back to formlessness, as part of how the universe naturally works. Each person appears for a short time from endless possibilities, and then returns to those possibilities. This return isn't a break in the journey, it's the completion of it. It's like a wave going back to the ocean. The wave doesn't vanish, it just becomes part of the sea again. In the same way, losing your personal identity doesn't mean you're destroyed. It means you return to the complete whole you came from. When you accept that you will one day be forgotten, you can see this return not as a failure or loss, but as a beautiful ending to the story of being someone. You understand that forgetting is not a defeat, it's simply how things complete their cycle. This way of seeing things can bring a deep sense of peace and connection to something greater than yourself. You realize that being forgotten isn't a punishment. It's part of finishing your trip from the source and back again. Part 96, Liberation of Attention. Maybe our greatest freedom is not in controlling what happens, but in choosing what we focus on. We have only so much attention, and where we put it really shapes our lives. Think about how much of our attention is spent worrying about what others think of us, especially people in the future who might remember us. That worry takes away energy from the things we actually care about, right here and now. When we stop worrying about how we'll be remembered, we free up that energy. Instead of using our attention to manage our image, we can use it to truly live. We stop acting for the future and start being present for ourselves. This change, from caring about appearance to being fully present, can completely change how we experience everyday life. When you accept that you won't be remembered forever, your attention shifts to what matters most to you now. You stop spending your mental and emotional energy on how you'll be seen later, and use it instead to deepen your experience of today. This shift often brings an immediate sense of joy and clarity. You realize that being able to focus on what's truly meaningful to you without worrying about future recognition is one of the most freeing things you can do. Part 97, The Dance of Existence. Maybe life isn't a straight path leading to a goal. It's more like a dance you perform with full attention and joy. Not about reaching a destination, but about responding creatively to the music of the moment. Dancers don't worry about recording their dance. They focus on how it feels to move. Their art lives in the moment they express it, not in whether it's remembered or saved. Thinking about life as a dance changes how we judge its value. It's not about whether people remember the dance. It's about how deeply and sincerely we perform it. The care and attention you bring to each movement matter more than whether anyone writes it down or watches it. A dance done with full presence doesn't need an audience. It has worth all on its own. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you can treat life like a dance, not like building a statue to be admired later. You focus on how you move through life, not on whether those moves will be saved in history. This shift can change how you relate to both everyday life and big moments. You find that dancing fully, even if it's forgotten, can bring a joy and satisfaction that no amount of future praise can ever match. Part 98, The Now of Eternity. Maybe eternity isn't endless time, but the deep, rich feeling hidden in each moment. It's not about living forever, it's about fully living now. Think about how, in moments of deep awareness, time seems to disappear. These moments feel timeless and powerful. Strangely, these timeless moments happen more often when we accept that we don't last forever. This kind of vertical eternity doesn't need to be remembered later to have meaning. It's already complete. It holds a kind of deepness that goes beyond our usual sense of time. Maybe when we want to be remembered, what we really want is to feel that our life has meaning beyond time. If that's true, then we don't find it by chasing memories. We find it by diving deep into the moment we're living. When you accept that you will be forgotten, the main thing keeping you from this deep experience disappears. You stop trading away your depth now for a hope of being remembered later. This change can help you see parts of life you couldn't see before because you were too busy worrying about your legacy. You realize that eternity doesn't come from being remembered. It comes from living the full depth of each moment while you're alive. Part 99. The gift of anonymity. Think about the freedom that comes with doing something good or creative without needing to sign your name. When you act without needing credit, you get to express yourself fully without being tied down by who you've been before. People who create without seeking praise often tap into a level of honesty and truth that's harder to reach when we're worried about being recognized. Their actions come from a deep inner need, not from a need for praise or reward. This idea doesn't just apply to artists, it can apply to anything. Helping someone without asking for thanks often feels more pure than help that comes with a need to be seen. Sharing wisdom without needing to be credited often carries more weight than advice that comes with a name attached. Throughout history, people have found that being anonymous can open doors to being more real. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you can use that understanding now, living as if you're already anonymous. You give, create, and care without needing people to remember you. This mindset can unlock a kind of honesty that is often blocked when we're trying to protect or maintain a certain image. You learn that choosing to be forgotten on purpose can set you free in ways that being recognized never could. Part 100. The eternal now. When it comes down to it, maybe now is the only thing that's truly real and valuable. Not the past, not the future, just the constantly unfolding moment of awareness. Think about it. Both your memories and your plans only exist as thoughts happening right now. The past is just what you remember in this moment. The future is just what you imagine in this moment. When you see it this way, being forgotten doesn't seem so terrible anymore. If the present is the only real experience, then being remembered later is just another future thought, not more real than what you feel now. Your life's value doesn't come from being remembered someday. It comes from how fully you experience your life in the moment. What matters is not whether someone thinks about you in the future, but how deeply you feel your life while you're living it. When you accept that you'll be forgotten, you're choosing to live fully in the eternal now. You invest yourself in the one thing you always have, your current experience. This change in focus often heals a quiet suffering, the kind that comes from always thinking about the future instead of really living now. You realize that being present in the eternal now brings a kind of deep satisfaction that no amount of being remembered after you're gone could ever give.